With Peter Kuten on Tuesday, Wednesday. So in Unit Yoyim, just a short Indian, which is interesting. The last remove in Oida Chaim, the Sibba Tufrei Sabbath Zayin, the remove is dealing there. There's two shitters. We'll see if they're showing them. If there's a chiyuv of Simcha Mishta, like we know Peter is a mitzvah of Simcha Mishta. There's a whole issue what about Peter Kuten. Peter Kuten is a chiyuv. The Rebbe brings down Yesh Amen Shechayv Lahavz B'Simcha Mishta, the Yid Dalet Shabu the Rishon, but others say the Shoynim, it's the Shittas Haram, the Motche, that there's a chiyuv Simcha Mishta. But the Rebbe says Ve'eina Hagen can, because Toysus as well also doesn't pass the so. But nevertheless, the Rebbe said Mekar Mokem Yirbek Tzas B'Sidre. Not Habe, but Tzas. Kedei let's yedei machmir. Because there are shitters, because of the shitters who are machmir, that's why the yirbik tzas besidre. First of all, we have to understand what is compromise tzas. Either the chiyuv or it's not a chiyuv. And if to be yotzid, you say to be yotzid the machmir, why dafke tzas? And basically, the tzas brings down that the shpatz besidre is that the chiyuv lahav is besidre. Yeah, the chiyuv. It brings down the Bechira Paris from Paris, the Bechira, which he invited people and made the whole issue on making a cedar on Yidalad Uda Rish. Now the Rebbe finishes off with Toiv Leiv Mishta Tumur. Toiv Leiv Mishta Tumur. One is going to have a good heart, Mishta Tumur. Basically, what's the connection? What's Toiv Leiv Mishta Tumur? Beforehand, the Rebbe Paskins, the Eina Hagen came. But then, here b'k'tzas b'sidre. And then it says, v'toy v'leiv mishta tumid. What is this pshat? The Amos says, you know that when you finish the Torah, the Elikon is through, and immediately the start of Bereshis. Why? Because by the Torah there's no end. You don't finish. There's no end. And immediately the start of Bereshis. Buddha basically is not starting of Bereshis Buddha because there's always a continuation. There's a shaykhis between the Elikon and Bereshis. And it seems like the Shechanur is the same. Because the Remu, which finishes off Oire Chaim, Toiv Leiv Mishta Tumit, how does the Remu start off beginning Oire Chaim Siman Aleph? Shavisi Hashem Lenegdi Summit. So you see that that's the Remus which we say in the Shchaydish. You see is Eichel Achatos, a Shnei Semiden Kelchusen. Every day we have to have in mind the Shnei Semiden. The Tumit from Toiv Leiv Mishta Tumit, and the Shvisi Hashem Lenegdi Summit seems the Chayre basically one depending on another, because it's something like this. How is a person Zoichet to Toiv Leiv Mishta Tumit, constantly being in Toiv Leiv? If you have the Shvisi Hashem Lenegdi Summit, this brings on that the person should be Zoichet to be constantly at Simcha. Yeah, the whole time being the Simcha, all your lifetime. Every person got ups and downs, but basically this is a chizik. If there's a Shvisi Hashem Lenegdi Summit, you live with HaKadosh Baruch Hu constantly, then you be Zoiche, Toiv, Leiv, Mishta Tuvet, and then you have a pleasant life, and everybody will be happy, constantly being happy. That's the whole purpose of our life, to be constantly happy and being satisfied with whatever we have, whatever we receive. We should be every time being pleased with HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us constantly. Anyway, so this is the Shnei Tamidim. Could be the name is why the movie finishes off this Tumit because it starts off this Tumit. Anyway, but coming back to our Shmiz here, just to understand what is this Yirbik Tzas B'Sidre, as we mentioned before. Why Tzas B'Sidre? Why only Tzas? To be Yoitze is do it like the other Rishonim has done. First of all, the base of this Haluch is always based on the Gemara. And once you know the Gemara, you come to the Rishonim, and then we'll be able to maybe work it out exactly to understand what the Gemara meant is Tzas. Basically, the whole Gemara here is based on a Sigil, Sechs Megillah, Davot, Umad Beis. The Mishnah starts off like this. Koryas HaMegillah Buddha Rishon. Because today we know all the Cheshbonos. Today we know that this year, beginning of the year, there's going to be a Uda Sheni. Yeah? There's going to be a leap year. But at the times when it was Bezdin, the time when Bezdin made Kiddush HaChodesh and Ibn Shuda, we never knew. It could be that Bezdin decided even the last day of Uda Lucha is, Bezdin could decide on the last day of Uda, on Tuf Shim Pei Beis, imagine, that we have to now decide, we have to add in another Uda, another Chodesh before this, because of the various reasons why Bezdin has got the rights to do so. You learn Mesechtas Rosh Hashanah, yeah, by Kiddush HaChodesh and Erev Shuna. There's various reasons why it does happen that Bezdin decides to add on another Chodesh. So therefore, today, obviously, it's not Shabbat. You know everything's been planned, like the Cheshbonis, which the Torah brings down. But at those times, we never knew it. So it could happen like this, that it was an ordinary year, Uda, came on Uda. Well, what do? You lie the 4 Pashas, Shkulim, Zucha, yeah, Puri Chodesh. And it comes the day of Yid Dalet Tesvav, so obviously we read the Megillah, no? The Kufim, Peruza, and what happened after writing the Megillah, Matunas Leviyonim, now Bezdin the next day, or even the same day in the afternoon, Bezdin decides we have to add on another Uda. So what do we do now? Do we say, well, once we have lied the Megillah, we've done all the mitzvahs which we're supposed to, actually, even though it comes on Uda Sheni, maybe there's no chiyuv to repeat the Megillah, because we've done the Megillah. And it was taken at the right time, because at the time when we read the Megillah, the Ibeshuna wasn't planned yet. It wasn't yet planned to make a leap year. But nevertheless, says the Mishnah like this: even though you have to now repeat reading the Megillah again. And the Mishnah says, so what's the difference between Uda Rishon and Uda Sheni in a leap year? In other words, as Rashi explains, that Pshat is, if Megillah, even though you read the Megillah, Uda Rishon, when it comes to Uda Sheni, you have to repeat reading the Megillah again. And Metunas Lu Aviyoyin, because the Buddha says later and beforehand that Metunas Aviyoyin goes hand in hand with Kriyas Megillah, because it says a name Shalaniyim Nesiyas Lemikra Megillah. Buddha brings down earlier, because the poor people of Yoinim are waiting. Oh, they hear the Megillah. Oh, now's the right time to go and collect our needs. Yes, Mishnah V'Simcha basically is a Mechleikas Rishonim now, because the Mishnah only mentions Kriyas Megillah. What about Mishnah V'Simcha? Yes, if you made Mishnah V'Simcha on the first Uda, do we have to repeat Mishnah V'Simcha the next Uda or not? It doesn't say so. It just says Matunis Leviyonim, Kriyas Megillah. So the question is, what about Caesar's period? Yeah, Mishnah V'Simcha. Why is it not mentioned Mishnah V'Simcha? And this is the whole shmiss in the Rishonim, based on this Mishnah, which we see the Mishnah only mentions Kriyas Megillah, Matunis Leviyonim. This has to be repeated when it comes to Uda Sheinim. And what about Mishnah V'Simcha? So let's read a piece of the Gemara. There's 2 versions in the Gemara how to understand the Mishnah, and then we'll come on to them. Gemara says like this: if the Mishnah only specifies those 2 items, Megillah, Matunis Leviyonim, says the Gemara, who le'inyan say the Parshiyas. What about the Parshiyas we mentioned before? When it comes to Uda, there's 4 Parshiyas: Shkulim, Zucha, Puri, Chodesh. What about that? Do we have to repeat it when it comes on Uda Sheni? Says the Gemara, the Indian say the Parshiyas Zeh v'Zeh Shuvim. What means Zeh v'Zeh Shuvim? That Rishon and Sheni is equal. What means equal? Does equal mean you have to go and repeat it? That's Pshat Zeh v'Zeh Shuvim. So you see in Rashi and the Rishonim, and I just quote you a piece of Rashi. Zeh v'Zeh Shuvim, says Rashi, means in other words, Shem Karam B'Rishon, that if they read the 4 Parshiyas Uda Rishon, Ein Tzurich Lachze V'Likris B'Shem. It's very important to understand this. Pshat says, what means Zev Zeh Shuvim? Doesn't mean Zev Zeh Shuvim mean you have to repeat it. Zev Zeh Shuvim means like this. Like the called Kriyas Megillah was Dalucha. If you read it Uda Rishon, yes, you're not yoytze with it. You have to go and repeat it when it comes to Uda Sheni. But otherwise, the Abba Parshiyas, what means Zev Zeh Shuvim? Like you're yoytze with the Kriya, obvious when it comes to Uda Sheni. So Uda Rishon has got the same quality as Uda Sheni. And if you read the 4 Parshas Uda Rishon, there's no need to go and repeat it Uda Sheni. That's called Zeh v'Zeh Shuvim. Yeah, again, in Kriyas Megillah it's not Zeh v'Zeh Shuvim, they're not equal, because by reading the Megillah Uda Rishon you're not being yoytze. You have to repeat it Uda Sheni, so it's not Zeh v'Zeh Shuvim, because Sheni is the one who is the time that's the right time on reading the Megillah. Otherwise, Shein, Rishon not. So in Rishon, you're not being yoytze the Kriyas Megillah. Otherwise, in Shein, you are yoytze the Kriyas Megillah. In Abba Parshiyas, both are equal. In other words, if you read the 4 Parshiyas Rishon, there's no need to repeat it on Uda Sheni. That's called Zeh v'Zeh Shuvim. Remember, not Zeh v'Zeh Shuvim means that the chiyuv refers on both Udas. Yeah. But Zeh v'Zeh Shuvim means if you read the 4 Parshas Uda Rishon, there's no need to repeat it Uda Sheni. Otherwise, Kriyas Megillah, you have to repeat it. But not Zev Shuvah means that the Chiyuv is relevant to both Udas. No, it's not relevant to both Udas. Zev Shuvah means that if, like being Yoitza, all your Chiyuvim on Uda Sheni, obvious, the same Uda Rishon has got the same quality as Uda Sheni. This is called Zev Shuvah. So this is the first version learning the Gemara. Now, when the Gemara comes along later on, because the Gemara had many kasha, I'm not going to go into that, otherwise we can go on here. The Gemara later on said, because the Gemara had many kashas, the Gemara later on came along with another pshat in the Mishnah. Because when we say in the Mishnah, Ein bein Uda Rish, Uda Shein, what does Uda Rish mean? The entire Chodesh. The difference between the entire Chodesh of Uda Rish and the Shein is what? Kriyas Megillah. And that is called, that's the Kriyas Megillah. Otherwise, in other Parshiyas, which is relevant to the entire Chodesh, the 4 Parshiyas, there we say Zev Shuvah. If you read the 4 Parshiyas with the Rishon, there's no need to repeat it with the Shein. Now, the second version of the Gemara is like this. How we learn the Mishnah is like this. The Mishnah is not dealing with entire months, Uda Rishon, Uda Sheni, but the Mishnah is dealing with Yid Dalet, on that specific day on Purim. Ein bein arbu usa sheba Uda Rishon, Yid Dalet sheba Uda Sheni. That means we're not dealing with entire Chodesh, Rishon Sheni, we're dealing on this specific day on Purim. That the difference between Abu Usa Shabu Derisha and Yidala Shabu Sheni is Eile Mikra Megillah and Maturis Levyoinu. Now, what is the implication? So you can't say we're dealing with Abba Pashas, because Abba Pasha is not relevant to the Yidalit. We're dealing now with this day of Yidalit. The difference between Yidalit from Rishon and Sheni is Maturis Levyoinu and Mikra Megillah. In other words, if you read the Megillah Rishon, now came on a leap year, Uda Sheni, then you have to repeat the Megillah. So what's the implication now? You can't say the implication is dealing with the Abba Pashas, because the Abba Pasha is not relevant to Yedalit, it's relevant to the entire Chodesh. Therefore, says the Gemara, according to this version of the Gemara, what's the implication? Says the Gemara, but what, where, otherwise, says the Gemara like this. Says the Gemara, Pule inyan hesped v'tanas, Zeh v'zeh shuv. What is hesped v'tanas? The lucha is, Peter, you're not allowed to make hesped, you're not allowed to fast. Right? Because we learned from Mishnah Simcha, the Gemara after all of them in base. Mishnah says the Gemara comes to teach us you're not allowed to. Simcha Mishnah, yeah. Simcha is a tanis. You're not allowed to fast. Mishnah, I'm sorry. Simcha is to exclude hesped, and Mishnah exclude tanis. Yes, yeah? Mishnah Simcha. The pshat is from there we learn that Purim there's a issue of hesped v'tanis. So now coming back to our sigya. What's the difference between Uda Rishon and Uda Sheni? Is Yidala Rishon, Yidala Sheni. It's only regarding Mikra Megillah. That if you read Megillah on Yidala Rishon, you have to repeat it when it comes to Uda Sheni. But otherwise, the implication is, wherever there Shuvah, what is there Shuvah? In Hesped V'Tanas. Hesped V'Tanas is what? It's both are equal. What is both are equal? Now here, you have to remember, it's very important this. The Pshat is, it's not the same as we learned before there Shuvah in Abba Pashas. The evidence Shuvah means that the din of Hesped V'Tanas applies to both Yidalits. The first Yidalit you're not allowed to fast, yes, you're not allowed to give Hesped, and the same will apply to Uda Sheni Yidalit. Not as we learned before in the evidence Shuvah, you understand what I mean to say. But you can't say, once you've been Yoitza, before we learn Pshat, when it comes to the Abba Pashas, well, how do you learn Pshat evidence Shuvah? That Pshat, if you've done the Kriyas Dalit Pashas Uda Rishon, there's no need to repeat it Uda Sheni, because Uda Rishon has got the same quality as Uda Sheni. That's called Zev Shuvah. Now, when you're dealing with Hesped V'Tanas, how will you learn Pshat Zev Shuvah? If being Yoitza with Hesped V'Tanas, you don't have to repeat it. But Uda Sheni, it doesn't make sense because it's a negativity. So it's not Pshat because I've done it. Other than what is Hesped V'Tanas? If you keep the din by refraining from fasting, and refraining from Hesped is what? By Uda Rishon, then you don't have to do it Uda Sheni. It's a negativity, yeah? So it's not shach to say, if you kept it by Uda Rishon, you don't have to repeat it Uda Sheni. It doesn't make sense. Because it's a negativity. So what the Pshat Zev Shuvah said to the Shayla, when it comes to Hesped V'Tanas, means it applies to both Udas. The din of Hesped V'Tanas applies to Uda Rishon, to Yidal Rishon, and Yidal Sheni. In other words, let's remember that, let's just get together the whole thing again. That the first Pshat Gemara, which we're dealing with Chodesh Rishon, Chodesh Sheni, And we say Zev Shuvim on Abba Pashas mean, in other words, if you kept the Abba Pashas and you dealt with it first, there's no need to repeat it, Uda Shem. When it comes to the second chapter, which we're not dealing with the two Chedushim, we're dealing with a specific Dev Yidalet. So what we Zev Shuvim in Hesped V'Tana, that the din Hesped V'Tana applies to both Yidalet. Yidalet Rishon, Yidalet Sheni, there's a din of Issa Hesped V'Tana. You're not allowed to make Hesped, you're not allowed to fast on Yidalet. This comes out the conclusion of the Sigya, and this is how you pass it basically. This is how you pass it. There's a Issa Hesped V'Tanas on Uda Sheni, Uda Rishon. Fine. But now, our Shal is, what about Mishta V'Simcha? The Gemara is only dealing with Hesped V'Tana. Again, at Uda Rishon, now comes Peter Kutin, that the Issa of Hesped V'Tana. So it's all about negativity. You're not allowed to fast, you're not allowed to do Hesped. But now the question is there a chiyuv to do Mishta V'Simcha? Yeah, does this give the answer? Because the Issa Hesped V'Tana does mean therefore, obviously, there's a chiyuv Mishta V'Simcha? No, raya. It could be talking not allowed to fast, yeah? But there's no chiyuv of Mishta V'Simcha on the first Uda. No, it's true. You can't say because of the din of the Issa of Hesped V'Tanas, the Yidal Rishon, it doesn't mean therefore to say that there's a din of Mishta V'Simcha. You got no raya.
It says Ein Bein.
What?
It says Ein Bein.
Me.
So therefore it has to be.
Fine. Very good, excellent. So therefore I'll just repeat and quote Tosfos. Yeah, a few words in Tosfos, not the whole Tosfos. Tosfos says like this, on this Sigya, the Yeshna Hagen. So Tosfos says very gewaltige Sache. Yeshna Hagen lasses yemei Mishta V'Simcha ba'Abu'usa b'Chamisha Usa means mekufa, yeah. Shal Uda Hu Rishon. Others we have the minig to be noyek, the custom to do Mishta V'Simcha on Uda Rishon as Uda Sheni. That's what Tosfos brings down. And Tosfos brings it down from the Mishnah. V'rahate de masnit name mashmekei. And from the word of the Mishnah is a chayre mashmeh, the same as he quoted his raya. What is the raya that the minig to prove and to support this minig of Mishta V'Simcha, even Uda Rishon? The raya is taka, as he said, and Tosfos brings it down, because the Mishnah mentions what? The chilik between Yidalet Rishon and Yidalet Sheni is what? Mikra Megillah, Matunas Lev Yoinim. Yes? It means Matunas Lev Yoinim. Yeah? Mashmeh, because the Mishnah says, Eile Mikra Megillah, Matunas Aniyim, Mechlal, and on that we say, Ein Bein, that we don't compare Rishon is not equal to Sheni. In other words, if you read the Megillah Yidalet Rishon, you're not being Yoitze, and you have to repeat it Uda Sheni. In other words, that means Rishon and Sheni is not Zeh V'Zeh Shuvim, because Rishon, you're not being Yoitze with the Megillah. With Sheni, you are Yoitze with the Megillah. But the implication comes out the Chayre what? But otherwise, Mishta V'Simcha is Zeh V'Zeh Shuvim. That means that the din Mishta V'Simcha applies to both Udas. Yes? This is the Chayre from the Mishnah, because the Mishnah only mentioned Matus Lev Yoyim. Matus Lev Yoyim, Kis Megillah, there we say what? That Rishon is not qualified for Kis Megillah, therefore you're not being Yoitz with Kis Megillah. Sheni is qualified. So Rishon and Sheni is not Zeh V'Zeh Shuvim. Because Rishon is not qualified for the Kriya, and Sheni is the month Yidalet which is qualified for the Kriya. But otherwise, Mishta V'Simcha, Zeh V'Zeh Shuvim. That's what Tosfos says here. The Chlal de Le'eni Mishta V'Simcha, Zeh V'Zeh Shuvim. This is how Tosfos wants to say, and Tosfos says, V'loi Nehira. Tosfos doesn't want to take on this chap. You know why? Because what did the Gemara say? In our Gemara it says, what is Zeh V'Zeh Shuvim? The implication of Zeh V'Zeh Shuvim, says Tosfos, the Gemara only mentioned Hesped V'Tanas. The Gemara said, Hu Le'enyin Hesped V'Tanas, Zeh V'Zeh Shuvim. Why did the Gemara go with a step further? That not only Mishta V'Simcha, not only Hesped V'Tanas, Zeh V'Zeh Shuvim, but even Mishta V'Simcha is also Zeh V'Zeh Shuvim. Why did the Gemara only mention Hesped V'Tanas, Zeh V'Zeh Shuvim? Why could the Gemara go with a step further? Not only Hesped V'Tanas applies to both Udas, but even Mishta V'Simcha. If the Gemara only mentioned Hesped V'Tanas, the Gemara didn't go with a step further, is a raya that Mishta V'Simcha doesn't apply to both Udas. This is what Tosfos wants to say. And basically Tosfos says in the Meskuna, so this is a shit of Tosfos. Again, so the shit of Tosfos is that because the Gemara only mentioned the implication of the Gemara of the Mishnah Zeh V'Zeh Shuvim on Hesped V'Tanas, it seems the Mishnah of Simcha, we don't say Zev Hashem. Because otherwise, why don't you go a step further? But the Ran Taki doesn't say so. You know why? Because the Ran says, why do we mention Mishnah of Simcha? Because basically, where is the Makar of Mishnah of Simcha we mentioned before? The whole Makar of Mishnah of Simcha in Piram is from the Pusik from Mishnah of Simcha. From Mishnah of Simcha, this is the Makar of Hesped V'Tanis. So even though the Gemara didn't mention it, if the Gemara mentions Mishnah Hesped V'Tanis, automatically, in this Hesped V'Tanis, you got already Mishnah of Simcha. Because the whole Makar of Mishnah of Simcha, of Hesped V'Tanis, comes from Mishnah of Simcha. The Gemara says of Yosef, Davdalit. Mishnah means what? Lafika Tanis. And Simcha, Lafika Avelis. So you got, so automatically you got the both. Both. This is the Shittah. So this is the Mechlek of the Shoyna. If Mishnah Simcha does apply to Udelishin as well, so you got Toysa says no, only has with the Tanas, otherwise Mishnah Simcha. And the Shittah said out. And this is Taka which we mentioned before in the Remu. Yesh Amnu Shachayv Lahabis b'Mishnah Simcha b'Yidalet. And who is a Shittah? This is a Shittah Zaran, the Tobish Amarib. And Ve'ein Hagin Kei, this is Shittah Toysa. Right? Is it clear? Fine. Now let's go back further. The Ruah Edzam, the Komo Yirbe Kitzas B'Sida. What's the Yirbe Kitzas B'Sida? What's Pshat Kitzas? Vermutlich either the Chiva, not the only Kitzas, why not Lahabes B'Simcha? So the Chayla could be Pshat like this because Vasem is here on this Toysus. Vasem is answer gewaltige Kasche. What the Toysus say? That's what people want to kid. The Toysus says Yeshen Hagen last me Mishnah Simcha, and the reason is why because if the Gemara if the Mishnah says, what is the chilik between Uda Rishu and Sheni, what is Mikra Megillah and Betus Leviyayna? So it says Toisus, is Mashma, is what? Mechlal, the Le'eni Mishnah, V'Simcha, Zev is Eshuvah. Yeah? Mishnah V'Simcha, Zev is Eshuvah. He says for Samuel, what do you mean Zev is Eshuvah? Zev is Eshuvah, if you remember the two versions of the Gemara, the two base had to lip Zev is Eshuvah. Other Zev is Eshuvah, as the first version of the Gemara, what? And the Gemara came along and the Gemara dealt with the Chodesh. And the Gemara says, otherwise, in Abba Pashiyas, what means Zev Zeshuvah? How do you know Pshat Zev Zeshuvah Abba Pashiyas? Does it mean that there's a chiv to read the Abba Pashiyas with both Udas? No. Not Zev Zeshuvah means you have to read the Pashiyas, Abba Pashiyas, Rishon Sheni. But Zev Zeshuvah means if one had read the Abba Pashiyas with the Rishon, there's no need to repeat it Uda Sheni. Not as Kriyas Megillah. Like Kriyas Megillah, if you read the Megillah, the first Uda, you have to repeat it Uda Sheni. But in Abba Pashiyas, is Zev Zeshuvah. So in other words, so why? Because we're dealing with a positive action. Positive. Doing an action. It means, in other words, reading the Pashiyas, whenever you say, if you read the Pashiyas Uda Rishon, so you don't need to repeat it Uda Sheni. When it came to version number 2, when we dealt with Yidalit, and the implication was on Hesped V'Tanis, how did you learn Pshat Zev Zeshuvah? It means that the then Hesped V'Tanis applies, the Issa applies to both Udas. It's a different Pshat in Zev Zeshuvah. Remember? Because when we're dealing with negativity, you can't say, if you've done it at first, you don't have to repeat it. What do you mean you've done it? It's all about negativity. In other words, refraining not too fast, not to do Hesped V'Tanis. You can't say, if you've done it the first edition, you don't need to repeat it. It's all negativity. So there we learn Pshat Zev Zeshuvah means what? The din Hesped V'Tanis applies to both Udas. So there's two ways to learn Pshat Zev Zeshuvah. When we're dealing with positive action, so what means Zev Zeshuvah? If you've done it edition, there's no need to repeat it shame. When we're dealing with negativity and Hesped V'Tanis, so what means Zev Zeshuvah? And the din is Hesped V'Tanis applies to it. Now, coming back to our Shmiz, we're dealing with Mishnah Simcha. What's Mishnah Simcha? Is negativity or doing action? Action. Simcha, Mishnah. So it says for Samuel, how could Toysa make a deal? Because the Mishnah said the difference between Yidal and Rishon and Shem is what? Is Megillah, Megillah, what's the implication? Otherwise, Mishnah Simcha Zev Zeshuvah. So what means Zev Zeshuvah? Means it applies to both Udas. It doesn't mean that the Mishnah Simcha applies to both Udas. It's like we learned in the Abba Pashiyas. If one kept Mishnah Simcha Uda Rishon, there's no need to repeat it Uda Sheni. So where do you have the Raya Toysa? How to Toysa with the Raya? That Zev Zeshuvah means, Mishnah Simcha means that you have to do Mishnah Simcha Rishon and do it Sheni. How do you know that? The implication is taka true. But what is the implication? Zev Zeshuvah means if one kept Mishnah Simcha Rishon, there's no need to repeat it Uda Sheni. Like we learned in what? In Abba Pashiyas. Because when you're dealing with action, there's no raya, it applies to both Udas. If you've done the tradition, there's no need to repeat and change it. So as I say, it could be a Mishnah Simcha. When it's Hesper Vatan, it's negativity, is ever that showing me that applies to both Sudas. When we're dealing with Mishnah Simcha, there's no raya, it applies to both Sudas. It means if you down Mishnah Simcha tradition, there's no need to repeat it. Therefore, I don't want to go further in the whole detail of Sasamas. But Sasamas says, I'm waiting that according to his time that he wants to say, after all, the fees are, just read his wording, which Isis Machimas, after the whole Shpiz and the Sigya, if I go deep in the Sigya further, it'll take who knows what. He said, the fee is there, because Sasamas comes along and he tells us that Avad there's no chiv to do the Mishnah Simcha Both Udas. In other words, the implication of the Gemara is how do you learn Pshat implication of the Gemara? If you down Mishnah Simcha Rishon, there's no need to repeat it shayli. Says Sasamas a gewaltige Sache. The Fize Efshe, the Einuche Lase Sides Pidem Udem Aleph. He says, it's not right to do Mishnah Simcha Udem Aleph. You know why? Because Kiva de B'deyevet Yutze. Because if one does Mishnah Simcha is Yoyse Udem Rishon, Imkein Alidei Ze Poite Atzmoi Mesides Pidem Sheni, Shehir Ikke. Because if this is Taka true, this Pshat, so if one does see this Mishnah Simcha Rishon, there's no need to make Mishnah Simcha Sheni. Meile, like Ba'oifin, so therefore it's better not to do Mishnah Simcha. Because if you do Mishnah Simcha, you yoytze your mitzvah. So when it comes to Pira Sheni, the real Pira, there's no Mishnah Simcha for you. You got no mitzvah, but you don't have the mitzvah. You've done it today, the edition. You've done the edition, like Abba Pashias. If you do Abba Pashias edition, there's no chiv to repeat it. So when we're dealing with positivity, we do Mishnah Simcha edition, there's no chiv of Sheni. Therefore, it's not right to do Mishnah Simcha edition, not to lose out when it comes to the Ikka Mitzvah, Pidem Sheni, which then, there you got the Ikka Mitzvah Mishnah Simcha. Therefore, says the Sasam, what's the Ayitza? Safka Sof Lamasa, the minig is, like Trille, the Mutaka says you do it. So he says, like Me'oifen Shlo Yechaven Lifte Mitzvah Sides Pidem. Do Mishnah Simcha, but don't be mechaven to be yoytze the mitzvah. Because if you're mechaven to do the mitzvah, you lose out. Because by having the kavuna by Rishon, you lost your mitzvah when it comes to the Sheni. Meile, kurz ist das was haben, it could be very geschmack. What does the Ramuz say? He brings the two shitters, and he says, Mekomu kiyib k'tzas. Why is it k'tzas? Very geschmack. Because if you do k'tzas, in other words, what are you showing? The indication is, I do it because the shitters are showing and das is to learn. The round taka learns taka. So the chiv of both scooters. The shitters around is taka. That the chiv Mishnah Simcha applies to both scooters because Hesped V'Tanis is based on Mishnah Simcha. And when you learn the good Hesped V'Tanis means what? It applies to both Udas, Hesped V'Tanis. And the Makar comes from Mishnah Simcha. So shitters around is taka that the chiv Mishnah Simcha is taka chiv of both Udas. About we don't taka Pascal so. But to be yoytze in the shitze, do it, but k'tzas, why k'tzas? Not to be yoytze. If you make k'tzas, so you only do it because of minig. That's betar minig, not betar chiv. There's a chilek between chiv and minig. You do it betar minig. It's therefore k'tzas to show that you're not yoytze out full chiv, because you don't want to lose out when it comes to Pidem Sheni. That's the idea of k'tzas. This could be Pshat B'chayre in the remove of k'tzas, to show that I'm not doing betar chiv, because otherwise I will lose out. Because once I'm being yoytze with Yiddish, I won't have the Sheni. So when it comes to Pidem Sheni, this person will be a last person. He hasn't got the Mishnah Simcha, he hasn't got the mitzvah. So therefore there's no Indian to go and drink and chav and psim piriya, but he no chiv against. So therefore to be able to enjoy himself, to be part of a klalis, is other rabbi. When it comes like this here, do it k'tzas, but to show that I'm not yoytze machir, I just do it as Torah minik, not mitzat chir, to be able to enjoy myself and to have the full mitzvah when it comes to Pidem Sheni. So therefore, I just want to finish off. That's why it could be the Rebu finishes off a Toiv Leiv Mishnah Tumid. What is Bashat Toiv Leiv Mishnah Tumid? I'm finishing off. Toiv Leiv Mishnah Tumid. What's Bashat Tumid? It's not Tumid means Tumid, constantly Tumid. Basically, we learned the Taz. The Taz brings down, as I mentioned before, the Lushna Taz is, let's quote the Taz. The Taz brings down that Nagu's Tashbat brings down the Yesh Laharbus, as we mentioned, not as Remuk Tzas, but Yesh Laharbus. Pirim Kutin, this year, Pirim Kutin, you should be Marba and Cedar. But the Beyi Echima Peri is Ruga Laharbus, Elahazma B'nei Udom, used to invite people and made the whole do and Rishon. Kemashmuas Lusha Mishnah, it's the Lushan Ataz. Like the Mishnah says, Ein Bein Uda. What did they mean, Ein Bein Uda? What did they mean? Because as we said before, because the deek of the Mishnah from Ein Bein is Mashmu Le'enya Mishnah V'Simcha Zev L'Shuvim. So therefore, Zev L'Shuvim, like the Shittahs Haran, see the Bechima Periyas, he had this minik Taki make a whole do of Peter Mishnah and made a whole do. And because, now it says the Taz, according to the Ben Yechiel, the Shap Mesam Remu Khan Toiv Leiv Mishnah Tumut. What did he mean? The Taz meant the Remu meant this name. Tumut means, what means Tumut? Tumut means no matter Rishon, Sheni, constantly. Rishon and Sheni, you should be knowing your Simcha. That's L'chai the Pshat. And the word Tumut means no matter Rishon, Sheni, whatever the case is, Rishon and Sheni, you should always keep Simcha. Mishnah. So maybe it could be Pshat, a Kurz Vasam is a very Geschmack. What means Toiv Leiv? What is Pshat Toiv Leiv, Mishnah Tum? What is Toiv Leiv? Could be Pshat is, there's a Medrash brings down Baris. Baris, Boyaz, when he met Ris, you know, it says, Vayetzev Liboy. Says the Medrash, Vayetzev Liboy, She'usig B'divra Torah, says the Medrash on Boyaz. Vayetzev Liboy, She'usig B'divra Torah, She'neime Toiv Li Torah's Pichus. So maybe it could be Pshat like this. Toiv Leiv, a person who learns Torah, Toiv Leiv, which just goes to Torah, the one who's about Talmud Chochem, Mishnah Tumah, he's allowed to make the Mishnah V'Simcha Tumah, the Rishon V'Sheni, like the Bechima Pri. Why? Because the one who's a Talmud Chochem, he knows the Aluch and not to be Mechav L'Shem Shemayim, L'Shem Mitzvah. Because he knows not to be Mechav L'Shem Mitzvah, he's a Talmud Chochem, he's Toiv Leiv. Mishnah Tumah, he could make the Mishnah Tumah, Rishon V'Sheni. But somebody who's not a Toiv Leiv, he doesn't learn, he doesn't understand, he doesn't know the Alucha properly, he'll think it's Mishnah. When it comes to Rishon, he'll be Mechav L'Shem Mitzvah, see this Piram. So never he'll lose out. When it comes to Uda Sheni, he won't have the Chiv anymore because he'd been Yotzes first. So Toiv Leiv, one is a Talmud Chochem. Toiv Leiv, Mishnah Tumah, he could make the seeds Pira and Rishon V'Sheni because he knows even when it comes to Rishon, not to be Mechav L'Shem Mitzvah, to be Yotzes, therefore he could be Yotzes Chiv when it comes to Pira.
Very nice.
Amen.